laid back and kicking it. Let's head back to the studio. Here's Rod.
All right, welcome back, everybody. The RP Show continues for this May 8th, 9th weekend edition. It is episode number 14 of Saskatchewan's favorite sports talk show. And so far today, we've had John Frenzy with us recapping the Canadian Football League draft, which went down Tuesday night. And then you just heard from Regina Pat's head coach, Dave Struch, with a wrap on a very successful Western Hockey League Hub Center, which you saw all the games here on Access Television. And now we go out on video chat, and it's our pleasure to be joined by the head coach of the U of R Rams football program, Mark McConkey. And as I can see from his office, he is in his office. You are at the U of R, are you not? Conks joining us here today?
That is correct, yeah. A few of us are able to come in here. We're kind of in our own little corner in the kinesiology building, so we're allowed to come in, sign in, and work from our offices.
Well, I'm sure you've spent a lot of time in there ever since you were named the head coach of the Rams football team. And as I said to you before we got on the air, we've got a lot to go through here today. So if you don't mind, let's go back to Tuesday night's CFL Draft. Where did you watch it? And before I ask about your players that went, what was your take on how it unfolded?
I did watch it at home. I was watching on my phone for the first two rounds, trying to corral a 2-year-old running around as well. So I was watching there. And then from there, I just kind of went on my laptop and just followed the draft tracker. Actually, I had a few recruiting calls that night as well. So I was on calls with some players from Grand Prairie, and I was also had my laptop on the side checking to see who was drafted next. So overall thoughts, I thought it was really great. It was great to see two of our guys get drafted, both to the same team. I think that's a great fit for both of them. And yeah, it is also great to see lots of Canada West players get drafted as well. We always talk about how Canada West is the strongest conference in youth sports, and year in, year out, the CFL Draft just confirms that.
Well, and let's just walk it back a little bit there. How about Jake Burt? The last guy deemed eligible for the draft is the first guy taken. Were you familiar with him? I was talking with Lynch about him earlier on. Did people know that his family? I didn't know the guy. And I wouldn't even think Patriots fans knew who he was until, last year when he was on the practice roster. What a wild story that was, that he would go number 1 overall to Hamilton.
Yeah, that's a pretty crazy story. I know I see both sides of it. I know some people aren't happy because he could have been maybe drafted the year prior or whatever. And I didn't even know he's from Regina, to be honest. I remember talking to Len Antonini, who runs RMF, last night about what's going to be happening there. And I brought his name up too, and he said same kind of thing. He obviously must have just been born here and moved at a young age. Yeah,
moved when he was 3 years old, but John Frenzy says that he knows the family. You know what? That's just another wild CFL story, right? That just makes it zany and wacky. But the number 2 overall pick, Nelson LeCounte, frankly, I thought the Riders would go with him because he checked off all the boxes. Local team, tremendous player, great character, and ready to come. Were you surprised when you saw Nelson LeCounte from your rival Huskies go number 2 overall?
Not at all. He's a heck of a player. I mean, we play against him usually twice a year, and he's made me look bad a few times as the offensive coordinator, and sometimes our quarterbacks look bad when we try to throw at him. I'm not surprised at all, and again, happy to see him get taken by the Riders. I think he's a great player, great off the field person, again, excited to potentially not have to play against him anymore moving forward.
No kidding, because he is, good point. He is a game changer, and he will be showing up for training camp if there is one. But to your guys, would you put money on Robby Lowe's going ahead of Kyle Borsa? Round 4 versus round 4. Would you have won that bet if you'd put money down on it?
I think I would have lost that one. Just the amount of teams that called, whether it was scouts or head coaches or GMs talking to me about those two guys. Those were the two big names coming from the Rams into the draft. And more teams seem interested in Kyle. Just obviously he checks all the boxes from the running back spot. His 40 was the fastest in the virtual combine. So he attracted more attention. But then again, you look at the CFL and the Canadian spot, it all comes down to playing special teams. And Robby Lowe is, I call him a special teams grinder. He'll run downfield, he'll make tackles, he'll do everything you ask him to. Kyle will too, but Robby's just got more experience doing that from the linebacker position. So I did lose that bet to myself, but again, just happy to have them both drafted and both in a good spot in Winnipeg.
For sure. And Robby, by the way, he will make his mark on special teams, obviously, but I saw him play on your defense. He was a very key part of your defense. There's no doubt. But let me, what I've also heard from the football people, though, is that because those are two Regina kids, it's probably not the worst thing to get out of the rider glare and the pressure and being at home and go to another town, right? Well, your thoughts on that going to Winnipeg might be a good thing for him to be out of that glare.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is. It's always exciting when guys get drafted anywhere, but to be able to go to Winnipeg to get away from the hometown and move away from your parents and stuff, that might be a good thing. So you can really focus in and dial in. I know they all want to be drafted by the Riders because that's their hometown team. They grew up going to Rider games, and again, we've seen it with guys like Mitch Picton too. So either way, I'm sure they're just happy. I don't think they really cared where they landed, but they're just happy to be on a team and get into a training camp this August, hopefully.
Well, Mark, as you know, those allegiances switch quick. There's a lot more Bombers fans. I know that there was a real groundswell for the Riders to draft those two from their families and friends, but now all of a sudden the allegiances turn, and all of a sudden that rivalry is kind of spicier than it had been, so that's fun. Now, there was news this week, as you well know, that Canada West has revamped the format of a lot of sports, including football, and you're going to be playing a shortened season. Down to 6 games. What's your take on how Canada West football will look this fall?
It's definitely going to look a little different, but again, at the very beginning, all we want is a football season. So it could be a 2-game season if needed. Our guys would be excited to play, and so obviously, we would like an 8-game schedule, the full meal deal, but we'll settle for a 6-game schedule. So we're going to play everyone once. We double up with Manitoba, and then we still have the normal playoff format with the national semi after the Hardy Cup and then the Vanier Cup. So our guys are just excited. It's going to be a bit of a later start. I think tentatively our first game is going to be that September 24th, 25th weekend. Therefore, training camp would start around September 3rd. And normally we start August 10th. So our guys get a little bit more time to train and work in the summer. And just kind of get back into the swing of things. So ultimately, we're just happy to have a season. I'm glad Canada West was really proactive in this, and they're setting the schedule and getting all these things passed early May.
Well, this is fairly ground-shaking stuff because the football people that I talked to just last weekend said, second week in August, that's when we're going. So obviously they'd been working on this for a while, but nobody really knew until this week's announcement. Right.
Yeah, I know they've been, again, behind the scenes meetings with athletic directors and coaches, and I've talked to quite a few Canada West coaches. So we had an idea this was coming, and to be honest, more of it has to do with finances than it does with COVID. Just everyone's taking a hit. There's no more rec and athletic fee for the 1 year off. So it's a one-off year of a 6-game schedule, and then next year in 2022, we'll be back to a normal 8-game season.
Yeah, well, the CFL talked about a 6-game bubble season last year. Didn't happen, but you got the Spring League who kicked off this week, and I think they only play 4 or 5 games, Mark. I mean, you get it as well as anybody. 6 games actually isn't that bad compared to what it could have been.
Definitely. Yeah, I know we were looking at some 4-game schedules where we play U of S and Manitoba only. So I'm happy with the 6-game schedule. I know our players are pretty excited, and we just started running on our field in small groups thanks to the health authority new guidelines. And yeah, our guys, the buzz around here is pretty positive for once. It was a long winter for our players and coaches and organization. So we're just we're happy. The light at the end of the tunnel, it's finally within reach, and now we're gearing up for hopefully a successful season.
Yeah, and not to take you back, and I'm sorry to get into the minutia of how you do business, but I got your email to the fans and stakeholders a couple weeks ago where you said we're looking at a 4, 6, 8-game season, and we've got our spring camp planned, and then you had to pull the pin on that. How far does that set you back from what you normally would have done in terms of numbers, who you'd have brought in? Like pulling the pin on your spring camp, how does that throw a wrench into what you would normally do?
It's a big wrench. So normally that's the first time all of our high school signed recruits can come, and we actually get to see them at our level. Everyone looks good in high school, and again, we're recruiting the top of the top players from each team all across Western Canada. And then now to see them go against our older men is really they get put in their place a little bit that weekend, and because the speed of the game is just that much faster. So we're missed out on that. And we also have probably 8 to 10 local players who are coming to try out to make the team. So we're still waiting to see what to do with those guys because we're not allowed to in-person recruit. We're not allowed to have them on in our training right now. So It has definitely set us back, and again, COVID's really set us back recruiting wise, just evaluating. We know who the top players are in Regina, but I'm sure we're missing some guys just because we haven't seen them play for 2 years. So excited to hopefully get some spring league football going at the end of June, July, and even if we have to get into next fall, that's okay too.
Yeah, and I think the reason it's important for you to answer those questions is just so your fans know and the viewers that it's not just you're going to show up on the field September 3rd and away we go. It has not come without its heartache. But let me ask you this about some of the names. And the quarterback position is the sexiest. Where are we with Josh Donnelly, Sawyer Bittner? What's your quarterback room going into camp?
Yeah, again, I think I've said this numerous times. I think we got the best quarterback room in all of Canada. We got Josh Donnelly, who's a great player. He showed that as a 19-year-old last year. Then you bring in a wily vet like Sawyer Bittner, who's had playing experience at the junior level with the Regina Thunder. He lit up the league there. He went to Ottawa, played for a year. So he's going to be pushing Josh for sure. And then we got some young guys like Noah Pelche, Team Canada guy from Belfort Collegiate. He's really come along in his first year. And to be honest, he might have the strongest arm out of the whole group as an 18-year-old. And then we got a really smart quarterback from Calgary, Bryden O'Flaherty. So he's in the mix too. So those four guys are going to be pushing each other, going to be competing, and they're all in. They're like at our elite level of players on our team. They're all really committed. They're all really bought in. And again, the future's bright here because you need a quarterback to win in Canada West and in Canadian football. And I think we're set up for success in the future years here.
You need a healthy quarterback to win in Canada West, too. How are you going to decide who starts week 1, Mark? Are you feeling any pressure here? Because we know those quarterbacks they got fan bases. You know that. Both of them do.
Yeah, definitely. At the end of the day, the best guy's going to play. It doesn't matter who's in there. So what we do is we grade our quarterbacks on everything they do. So in throwing in one-on-ones, in Skelly, in team time, anytime they have to make a decision on any of the run pass options, we give them a grade. So they either get a 0 or a 1. We keep track of their 20-yard plus throws, their touchdowns, their interceptions. And then at the end of training camp, I just have a big Excel sheet and it kind of spits out a number. It says, okay, Josh Donnelly was 87% efficient. Sawyer Bittner was 85% efficient. We're going with Josh. Or if it's vice versa, we're going with Sawyer. So the best guy is going to play, and it's pretty black and white. It really spits out the data, and it's just who's going to run our offense efficient or the most efficient is what it comes down to.
And you don't have a preseason game to determine this. Am I right in that?
Yeah, I haven't. I've been asking, but I know we were planning on playing U of A in Saskatoon in August, obviously in the normal season. So I'm not sure if we're allowed to do that this year with all the new restrictions. I doubt it. So yeah, we might not have an exhibition game. It might just be a inter-squad scrimmage. So we'll see how they do when the bullets are flying.
That helps. That's better than nothing. But just in the time that we have left, where are you on the analytics game in terms of how much you rely on them and how deep do you go with your numbers?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely a growing field in football. I know lots of NFL coaches have alluded to it. And one of our staff members, Thomas Retzlaff, he works heavy in the analytics. He does a lot of our breakdowns for defense, but he does a lot of team data analytics. And he gives me all these reports. And sometimes you can just get so caught up in the numbers on certain things. And sometimes it takes you away from your game plan a little bit. So I've really tried to find a balance between the two of them, of not getting too caught up in the analytics and really just coaching football and going with the flow of it. Because I think any offensive coordinator will know it's kind of an art to calling plays. You have to call certain things to set up different plays or different looks. And the reasons why you call these plays early in the game is to get a certain read or an adjustment from the defense. So you can't get too caught up in the analytics to expect that they're going to be doing this, but you do have to use it to your advantage. But yeah, it's just trying to find that balance is the hard part of it.
I won't necessarily ask you who your mentors are unless you want to tell me, but who are the coaches that you look up to in the pro or college game or any other level that you would like to emulate?
Yeah, I've got a few for sure. I'd probably have to start close to home with my dad. He was a big-time football coach in Calgary. He coached the Calgary Colts actually against Frank McChrystal, which is part of the reason why I came here after high school. And then I got to go with Frank McChrystal and Bernie Schmidt. Those are two of the best coaches I think ever in junior football history and even youth sports history. Still got great relationships with those two guys. They're guys that I could always lean on for answers. And then just currently on staff, we got some great coaches like Dwayne Mason, Sheldon Neald, and Jeff Stusek. Those are some guys I can really lean on because they have the experience at this level and coaching. And I'll say it, they're a little older than me, so they're a little wiser.
Who's the pro coach, though, that you're watching on TV and go, I like his style. I want to know more about him and how he does things?
Well, I can't say Mark Mueller because he's got a different style, but I would say Dave Dickinson and Craig. I really like their style. I've guest coached with Mark actually in the Stamps a few times, and I really like the way Dave does things. We have very similar mannerisms. We're not big yellers. We're not intense guys. We're kind of more laid back, methodical, and everything we do has a purpose. So I really do look up to a guy like Dave.
Well, you don't see Mark Mueller on television anyways, and I think that's a good thing. We are trying to get ratings, after all, for CFL football. Hey, you mentioned some fundraisers here, and we have a few minutes left, or at least one big one for the University of Regina Rams. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we're running another online 50-50 from about May 14th to June 17th, I believe. Again, it's going to be, but now last time it was only Regina area and surrounding area could buy tickets. But I think this time we're pushing it all the way to all of Saskatchewan. So the pot's going to get a little bit bigger. We're working on seeding the pot early too to get that number a little higher. So yeah, just keep a lookout for that on our Regina Rams website or all of our social media. So hoping to make some more money this spring and kind of put us in a good situation for the fall and the future.
Well, what people don't understand is we did not have rider games for the Rams to sell 50-50 tickets at, right, which is your biggest fundraiser. So this would be a way of helping recoup that cost. As you said, getting on the field this fall in a shortened season has more to do than finances than because of COVID. So this will be all the same website and all the same social media channels to follow along, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and just if you can allow me, what I got, about 3-4 more minutes? I just wanted to ask you about, because you're a Calgary guy, I drove by Hellard Field on my way out to CFL meetings a few years ago that were in Banff, and I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And with this CFL, XFL talk, you realize, you're in the league, you know what the talk is, that they might be changing field dimensions. Could you ever see a day that the Dinos would go play at Hellard Field? Because quite frankly, I think it would be awesome instead of a huge empty McMahon Stadium. But what do you think the future is ahead for Canadian football and youth sports football if the rules of the CFL change?
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I think it should stay the way it is with the 3 downs and the big field because it is exciting. It's a passing league. Again, I like watching NFL. Don't get me wrong, but when you look at the analytics, the run pass ratio, it's a lot more favored to the run in the NFL than it is the CFL. So I think that's the exciting part of the CFL game is the big field, the waggle, the extra player. So, but at the end of the day, if the CFL does change to 4 downs and the field dimensions change, I wouldn't be surprised if U Sports follows suit just because we want to put our players in the best chance they can be in to play in the CFL. So if that's what it takes, I'm sure that's the route we'll go.
So you're not necessarily a believer in football's football?
I think there's so many differences between the Canadian game and the American game. Even when we go to the Nike coaches clinic every year as a staff, and there's some things that you can take, and there's some past concepts that are just completely different. And I also do a lot of film work with Mark Mueller and pick his brain and see what they're doing in Calgary. And he always talks about some of the off-season projects they do. And yeah, there's some things you can take from it, but at the end of the day, there's just so many differences between the Canadian game and the American game that some of those concepts and plays don't roll over to between the leagues.
Do you think Hellard Field could host university football? Like, I think for sure we know Libel's hosted the juniors. I'm not sure the Rams have ever played there, but do you think Hellard Field could host at least one Dinos game in a year?
I do think so. They have the one main field with the big grandstands. I think they could host there. We actually played at Libel Field last year, our last game against Manitoba. And it was a nice game. I think we beat them by 30 some points, so it's always a good memory. But that's what we're looking to do as well, is to play one of our regular season games at Libel every year moving forward, because it is more of a college atmosphere. Again, I love playing in the new Mosaic Stadium. It's beautiful. You get the scoreboard, you get the big, nice booths, stands, or fans can sit wherever they want. But there's kind of more of that atmosphere of a college when you're in those smaller stadiums. So it's always cool playing in those places.
Well, Coach, that's you'll forgive me when I go, 2019. Right. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, so I apologize. Well, I got all my questions out. I appreciate you answering them, Coach. We're watching very closely what you're doing, obviously. Good luck here the rest of the way, and thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
The head coach of the University of Regina Rams football program, Mark McConkey, joining us.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.